No amount of mental preparation could have prepared me for what I was feeling in that moment. Hi ladies, thanks for stopping by. If you don't know me, my name is Hellynn and I am currently in the middle of getting IVF in Korea, but I have come home back to the States in California for the holidays, so I'm settling back at home right now for a couple of months before I go back for my transfer. It's just so nice to be back home with my husband and my cats, and yeah, I'm so happy. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that I have infertility due to low ovarian reserve. I have a condition called diminished ovarian reserve, and the indicator for that is a super low AMH of 0.06. Actually, I guess had a super low AMH. I still have a low AMH, but it did go up in September, which I'll talk about in a different video. But also I am of advanced maternal age. They really need to change that term, but I am 40 years old, and so time was really running out for me, and I needed to have back-to-back rounds of egg retrievals in order to bank enough embryos to potentially have 2 kids out of this. The reason why I went to Korea for IVF is because I used to live there, so I know my way around. But not only that, the medical world in Korea is just so advanced, and it's a lot cheaper. It's a tenth of the price that it is here in California or in the States anywhere, and the success rates are pretty high. In my last video, I started talking about PGTA and what it is and how I came to the decision to test my embryos for round 5. And definitely not saying that it was the right way to go about it, but it's how I went about it. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll link that above, and maybe you can watch that before you continue on with this one. But today I wanted to do a continuation of the last video and talk about my results for PGTA. I feel like through this whole journey, I've been pretty emotionally stable for the most part. But this round, it was a freaking emotional roller coaster. So in my last video, I talked about the 2 different times that you can actually get PGTA done. One is right after your egg retrieval, after they cultured the embryos, and the other time is right before the transfer, but I opted for the more common method after the embryo culture. This was pretty hard because I did not hear anything back for 2 weeks after my egg retrieval. One thing that Korean hospitals can probably get a little bit better at is better communication regarding how your embryos are doing, if any of your eggs were fertilized, all that stuff. But you don't know anything, and so you just kind of have to wait for 2 weeks not knowing anything. This can seriously drive a girl insane. I remember I kept kind of killing hope during those 2 weeks and telling myself to expect the worst, because, you know, I've had rounds before where I had no eggs fertilized. I just did not want to be disappointed again. And my attitude throughout all of IVF has, for the most part, been positivity and let's get through this. But oh man, I think after 4 rounds of IVF, my spirit was a little bit shattered at that point. I was jaded. So 2 weeks after my egg retrieval, when I finally went to the doctor's appointment to find out what had happened, I remember he looked at his screen and he was reading everything for the first time too. So he looked at his screen and saw that I had gotten 2 really great grade embryos, 2 blastocysts out of this cycle. I've always only had average grade embryos or below average, and so this was great news. I was so excited that I could have embryos that were of a higher grade. But then this news was followed by pretty devastating news that both embryos had tested abnormal, and I remember thinking, you should have led with that. Just give it to me in the beginning. Both of these embryos had tested abnormal, and I believe that one of the embryos had trisomy 12 and 17, and then a bunch of mosaicism. The other one had trisomy 18, and then mosaicism and the other chromosomes as well. I remember feeling really numb in that moment. I had prepared myself for the worst, and all that preparation was literally for nothing, because I just felt so numb as I was hearing this information. I was not absorbing it very well. After my appointment, I paid $600-ish for testing my 2 embryos. I left the hospital absolutely crushed. When I got home, I broke down into tears, and that whole morning I did the ugly cry. And mind you, I am not the type of person that just cries all the time. I think it's totally okay to cry all the time, but I don't think that I had cried that much during my IVF journey. I've been really trying to push myself to be extra positive, and this was the round where I just couldn't help it. It just felt so heavy. Everything just felt so out of my control, and no amount of mental preparation could have prepared me for what I was feeling in that moment. It's so funny because even after that crazy morning of just crying, I looked like somebody had punched me in the eyes. I was so swollen from all the tears. I am still such a people pleaser that when the Oriental medical clinic that I had been going to for acupuncture, they called me and they asked me to come in to fill out a questionnaire for them. Even after that crazy morning, I picked my ass up and I went all the way to the acupuncture clinic. I decided to participate in a study with them as a subject, and they told me that today was the last day that I can come in to fill out that questionnaire, and they really needed me there. I guess I was hoping to see my acupuncture doctor. She specializes in fertility, and so I thought that I would go in and tell her the news and tell her how things were going, and I don't know, I did not expect what was about to happen. I had been going to this clinic for since at least a month before I started IVF. I went twice a week, every week, and I was very consistent. The whole study was to see if the acupuncture that I got would improve my results for IVF. We weren't finished yet, but I had gone through 5 rounds already, and so at this point they needed some kind of questionnaire to be filled out. When I told her about my day, she was basically like, why would you get PGT done? You know that the test can be really inaccurate. You know that embryos can potentially self-correct. PGT is usually done for people who have had multiple miscarriages. Why would you do that? You could have thrown away perfectly good embryos. Her tone just set me over the edge. I could not deal. I remember bursting into tears at the clinic. I was so sad to be told that I made the wrong decision. It made me question everything in that moment. I mean, it was the first time that I got a really good grade embryo too, so it just made me question everything and feel so insecure about my decision. Then the sadness was overcome by anger. I was so mad. I remember feeling this heat coming over my body and I was just so angry. And I kind of made a scene. I made it very clear that I was not happy with what she said to me. I left that clinic and never set foot in that clinic ever again. So I only had acupuncture done for round 1 through 5, and then 6 and 7 I just went without it. Okay, I've come across this very accusatory, self-righteous attitude when it comes to PGTA and the topic of whether to do it or not in the IVF world. I've heard it on Facebook groups. I've heard it from doctors. I've heard it from acupuncture doctors, like the one that I had. I've heard it from friends who had IVF and think that they know best. When it comes to the decision to test, I think that it's a very personal one. Maybe it's not the right decision, or maybe it is the right decision, who knows, but it's your decision and you have your reasons for making it. You definitely should not be criticized for it. So I hope that no matter what your stance on testing is, we can all just have a little bit more compassion and kindness around this topic. There's no point in telling people who have done it that they shouldn't have done it. I think sharing facts is one thing. I think we should all share facts and research, but I hope that when we talk about it, we're respectful and just a little bit more kind. After some time passed, I actually sort of agree with the acupuncture doctor. So after my 5th round, which is when I tested, I did 2 more rounds. I had round 6 and 7, and during those rounds, I decided against testing. I can still test later before the transfer if I decide to, but for now, I decided to hold off on that because, you know, I just haven't made my decision yet fully. I don't want to test and potentially throw away embryos that could self-correct after the transfer. I also don't want the few embryos that I have that I worked so hard for to be harmed in any way during the testing. I know that there is potential for the embryos to get damaged. For somebody who has a tough time making a lot of embryos, I think it might not be such a bad idea to just not test and let nature take its course. So the way that my doctor has talked to me about it is that if the embryo is abnormal, it's most likely not going to stick and you'll miscarry pretty early on. There are definitely rare cases where abnormal embryos do stick and then that becomes a pregnancy and later a live birth. And sometimes, you know, you find out in the middle and then terminate the pregnancy, which is even more heartbreaking and that's even more time loss. So there's that side of the argument as well. I am keeping an open mind and I think I'll continue to research, but yeah, for now I have decided not to test and I have a couple of months while I'm on my break here in the States, so I will think it over. So if you have any advice for me, please feel free to share that in the comments below. But like I said, please be kind and a little bit more sensitive when it comes to this topic. Thank you so much for listening to my story. And please take a minute to like this video and subscribe to my channel and Share this video with somebody that you feel like might need it. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon.